Most women who fall into deep, healthy love all say, this person wasn't my usual type. I would have never dated this person. Now, why is it a constant reality? Because this woman realized that her ego's desires, her perception of who I need and who I want, never actually got her what she needed and what she wanted. So she sacrificed that little yapping voice who only wants to perpetuate wounding and karma, and entered a state of trust and surrender to her highest self, knowing that I trust your knowing, your intelligence, to bring me someone who is my divine counterpart, versus my little dumb ego who thinks they know better than this magical being to give me who's actually my lover. Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of the New Age Sage podcast. I can't wait for this one. In all my years of being a laborious nerd, diving into all kinds of books on esotericism, mysticism, Christianity, different religions, philosophy, quantum physics, I found one book that truly changed everything in my life. There's that cliche, if you read a book and you're never the same man again. That shit happened, truly. And the book essentially is a code that breaks all codes. That if you integrate this code, you will enter the best possible timeline of your life you could imagine. Way beyond anything your ego could possibly compute in this moment. And this concept is called Coniunctio. Essentially, without boring you all with this dense philosophy, and all this is going to do with essentially, I'm going to use this concept to help you understand how to transcend the ego's karma of dating, attracting bad partners, narcissists, players, people are going to use and abuse you, and enter the possibility of attracting in only beautiful, divine, light beings romantically. And who wouldn't want that? If I could ask 100 people what's caused you the most pain in life, beyond losing a loved one, the biggest one is heartbreak, is dating a narcissist, is ruin their life, ruin their self-worth. If this concept is integrated properly, you basically completely avoid the possibility of attracting in a bad person. That's a lottery ticket right there. Like, imagine integrating a concept where you will literally remove all possibility of attracting in a negative partner. And if you can, there's many studies that show that the metric for the most impactful, worthy, and meaningful life is reflective of one choice, and that's a partner you choose to stick with. So your whole experience of life, your happiness, your meaning is dependent on your ability to pick and attract a good partner. This concept will literally allow you to only attract in the highest possible partners in the data point of good people. So, to explain this term first philosophically, it's called Coniunctio. So some context on it, without boring you too much. This concept was coined by the daddy of all psychology, my guy Carl Jung. I've learned a shit ton from him. He's been a guide in this, not literally, but metaphysically, metaphorically, literally by reading his words, has informed my opinions and concepts on everything I teach. And before he passed away, his magnum opus, his the final thing, the final thesis, the final point of ideology, of psychology, of spirituality, the final point he hit before he died, that he believed to be the most important thing he ever uncovered. They only had time to really just start unpacking that this book, I'll link it below, really unpacks and fleshes out by this Jungian scholar. This was Jung's literal magnum opus. This one of the smartest, I believe the smartest man alive in regards to psychological literacy and understanding the unconscious mind, how to utilize our own brains and psyches to activate our highest potential. I believe that man is the wisest and most knowledgeable about that thing that we should all pursue, is to access the highest version of ourselves through psychological work. And this concept was his magnum opus. All of his work led to this. So I hyped it up enough. I hope that was a crazy hype up. But what coniunctio means is that, so to get a little woo-woo on y'all, and I'll try and break things down also literally. So if you're not with the woo, which is okay, you can understand this and integrate it as well. So essentially, God, nature, fate, what you call it, births us, births Lucas, births whatever your name is, and that's the ego essentially. So like God births the ego. He births the incarnation of a human that's separate from divinity, separate from nature, a separate character in the simulation, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, in reality. We go about our lives individuated, meaning we believe we're separate from reality. Our ego is essentially the vehicle that separates us from humanity, that makes us feel like we're different, we're separate, we're better, we're less than. It's the differentiating value that makes us feel less than or greater than the people around us. That's the ego, or it's also the part that wants to separate from what is. When our flight's delayed or there's traffic, it's a part of us that complains and separates from the reality of there's traffic, the plane's delayed. That's the ego, right? And then we all have that in us. We're all incarnated into that system. However, this is where Jung really fucking, goes out there, is the final point of anyone's psychological development, the last hurrah, the final stage, the boss stage. If we're playing Mario, this would essentially be the final 8th world boss stage with the biggest Bowser possible. The ego gives birth to the higher self. So let me unpack that a bit. Regardless of what you believe in, if you asked 1,000 people and you said, hey, can you agree with this statement? There is a part of you within your consciousness that knows what's best for you and knows better than you right now, that you can access and ask questions to, that knows more than you. Every single person would say yes. There's a part of me that knows best. Call it the wiser part, the smarter part, the one that you find in clarity. Everyone has had moments where they're in stillness, where they have access to a voice that just knows way more than their ego, their little self can possibly imagine. And that's more, literal, that we all have a part of ourselves that knows more than us. But going back to the woo-woo, gang, that the part of us, that's a spiritual part of us. That's the spirit. I believe that when we transcend the little self, the egoistic character, Lucas, for example, that believes in separation, I'm better than people or worse than, I'm insecure or I'm cocky, there's a part of ourselves beyond that called the self. That is the highest, wisest version of ourselves that is really the one guiding us. Evidence for this, beyond just believing it, because it is, I believe it's true, but if you want evidence, if you feel uncertain, insecure, which is okay, we literally dream worlds that are designed to teach us through symbolism where we're coming up short. There is undisputable evidence that our dreams are pointing towards parts of ourselves that need integration and healing. Okay, so you have part of your psyche that knows more than your ego, that's trying to show you where you're coming up short so you can see it, integrate it, and heal it. That's pretty wild. And I believe that is the self. The higher self that exists beyond space and time and beyond the psyche or unconscious, beyond what I can even put to words, that knows more than us, that is guiding us. I believe that we can live in that space. And Jung believed that's what coniunctio is. Coniunctio means sacrificing the little egoistic self with its constant needs and desires for that higher self that knows everything and knows it all. And we believe that part of us is outside of us, right? That wise, hyper-intelligent, hyper-loving being, it exists outside of us, but it's in us and we can access it. So imagine there's a way for you to access your highest self constantly. That's coniunctio. Coniunctio is the final stage in the psychological development of a human being, where they actually access the self constantly. It's not something outside of them. They become that thing. So how does this happen? How does one get there? All right. And what is this self? Okay. Just for context, I'm explaining this concept so you guys can understand it, so then I can extrapolate it to romantic relationships, just so you know. Okay. I believe that self is pure love, pure peace, pure bliss. The happiest version of ourselves possible. Now, In my years of studying this stuff and devoting myself to figuring out what the hell is happiness, what does it mean to be happy, I first thought it was, pleasure. That led me to be a hedonistic drug addict who was a womanizer and putting all kinds of things in my body. So that was like, okay, pleasure. And I actually conducted a study in college, one of the only useful things I did in college, which proved that if your definition of happiness is the feeling of happiness, pleasure, you are way less likely to be happy than someone who doesn't believe that. That's a wild thing that I proved, that if you believe happiness is pleasure, you're way less likely to actually be happy. So that was interesting. So that was like, okay, that's not that. And I was like, what is it, right? I started observing people, and I saw, okay, is it status? And then I looked, I come from wealth, so I've grown up around wealthy people, and some of the most miserable, self-hating, narcissistic motherfuckers I've come across are rich, powerful people. So okay, rich, money and power and fame isn't the answer. Okay, so that's not going to work. I've also met very happy rich people, but they're very not happy rich people as well. So it's not that. And then I would notice this common characteristic around the truly and most peaceful, higher vibration people that I met that were literally, very successful. Waiters I've met, a butler I had on vacation, a very successful entrepreneur friend of mine, all different walks of life, status, money, but they all had this one quality that made them the happiest people I've ever met. And that simply was the cessation, the annihilation of desire. That they truly believed that everything was perfect as it was. Every waking moment was a gift from God. That their insatiable hunger for wanting more never got them anything. They were always in a state of bliss because they believed that they were in a perfect state of beauty, no matter what was occurring. That was a common trait I noticed, that these people just didn't desire much. They were, whether they were super rich or super poor, they were just incredibly happy with what was existing. So the happiest people were the ones who were attached to the least. Think about that. The people you feel the happiest are just the ones who are attached to the least. I don't know if you guys share this sentiment, but whenever, I'm in a egoistic inflation where I'm, upset about a girl not texting back, or a podcast performing badly, or not getting a guest I wanted, I often think like, man, what if I just didn't care? What if I just wasn't attached to these outcomes? That's the metric for the happiest people. That's what the Buddha literally taught. The Buddha's prescription for happiness is literally just stop desiring so much shit. Stop being attached to outcomes. Just be. Just live in that serenity of blissful being. Now, why am I saying all this? That's Coniunctio. That is accessing the self, where you know that there is a being that is you, that knows more than the little you, that is always with you, that's always guiding you and always bringing what you need to you. And that thing knows way more than what you want right now. So that's the self, where it's all love, it's all beauty, it's all surrendered into perfect beingness. Then there's a little you who believes that they can find happiness and peace in satiating their egoistic desires in the now. For example, using myself, my little Lucas, who I still haven't accessed that Coniunctio. I'm working on it. In some ways I have. Some ways I haven't. But what I'm saying, when I'm the most miserable, it's because I'm thinking, man, if that girl goes on a date with me, then everything's okay. Man, if my podcast goes viral, then everything's okay. If, my dad finally loves me unconditionally, then everything's okay. If my friend stops being so angry all the time, then everything's okay, right? And then you kind of realize that you get these things, if you're lucky enough to get them. I have many of those things. Nothing changes. You're left there being like, I'm still the same. And then your brain goes immediately to the next thing. Oh, but this thing didn't happen, right? This person still hasn't texted you back. This thing hasn't happened, right? So those insatiable desires that always happen, it's never ending. And also to close this loop, what we're looking for is just peace and presence, right? If you dumb it down enough, it's like, okay, if I get this romantic partner, then what you actually perceive to be, I'll finally be peaceful, happy, and blissful, and in a state of acceptance. If I finally get the promotion, I'll finally be chill, accepting, peaceful. Or the common American dream is that once I make my millions, I'll retire and be peaceful. But peace is always here. The peace we're always searching for in the outcome of an egoistic desire is always here. We're looking for peace and love, but we're already swimming in it. We're already knee deep in peace and love. Think about it. Just right now, close your eyes, breathe, fill your heart, stop thinking, surrender to the moment. That's always here. Always here. Always. And nothing out there, no desire out there is ever going to give that to us. It may give it to us for a minute or two, but it's not permanent. That permanent state of bliss and love is here right now. And that is the self, the hyper intelligent being that knows that everything is okay. Man, if you all could just realize that you are held so tightly and so blissfully and so lovingly by your higher self, that security is so fruitful and rich that you can just surrender to that being. You can surrender to your higher self and trust, you know more than me. I surrender my egoistic desires to your guidance. I trust you, I believe you. And once you're in that state is blissful, peaceful, loving presence. And that is the higher self. That's the path forward. If you're not living in that state, you're in constant doubt. You're in constant chasing mode, chasing your egoistic desires. So, to get here, you essentially have to trust the guidance and the wisdom of your highest self. There's a painting, I forgot the name of it, but I use this image, I'll link it down below, where there's this man is on his knees, just with his hands up, just crying, and he has this being coming from heaven, higher realms, reaching down and holding him. And that's essentially what I'm saying, that like, we are so held by our higher selves. If only we could just reach up and grab them. But we're always looking down, looking at egoistic desires and ignoring that reality. Just look up and open your hands. You know, literally, whenever I see my ego wanting to make things happen, especially romantically, and I find myself in that rat race of thinking, if this happens, then I'll be happy, I put my hands up, I look up, and I feel my higher self. I allow myself to be embraced. I surrender. I literally put my hands up. I put my hands up, and me doing that is a metaphysical presentation of like, I surrender. I surrender. Now, that was a lengthy introductory way of explaining Coniunctio, which is a very deep philosophical concept that took me a while to understand, and I hope that y'all understand that now too. But now let's move to dating, where I think this concept gets extended to where, you know, I'm not saying I'm not Carl Jung, I'm not some genius philosopher, but this hasn't been discussed, and I connected some dots, and with the help of my guru, Abdi Asadi, he kind of showed me this extension of this, which I connect some other dots. So now when it comes to dating, this concept of Coniunctio gets super interesting, because I believe there are two realities for each person. One version, they're going about romance and dating from their egoistic desires of what they believe they need now for satiation. And the other version, where we surrender to the wisdom of the higher self to bring us exactly who we need to ascend into a higher vibration of living in love. When we are manifesting and idealizing ideal partners in our mind and chasing egoistic desires, we're basically manifesting reality through the ego, through the little self, through our karma. When we sacrifice those needs and we enter the wisdom of the higher self, we are no longer manifesting through karma. We're now entering God's timeline, or the timeline of your higher self, whatever language you want to use. That's the shift. Are you on your egoistic timeline of enhancing karma through believing that your peace can be found in satiating your egoistic desires? Or are you in a space of believing that there's a higher wisdom that knows more than you, that will give you what you need, that exists outside your egoistic preferences? That's God's timeline. That's a higher self's timeline. Now, ladies, Are you tired of attracting men who aren't fully ready for you? Do you feel like you have to shrink, adapt, or compromise just to make a relationship work? If so, I have something special for you. I'm hosting a brand new free masterclass called Attract a Man Who's Ready for All of You. And it's happening on March 1st. In this 90-minute session, I'll be sharing 3 proven principles to help you call in deep, lasting love without losing yourself in the process. This isn't about games or tactics. It's about stepping into your full power and attracting the kind of partner who embraces you exactly as you are. If you're ready to transform your love life, save your spot now by going to lucassalame.com/masterclass. That's one word. Or by clicking the link in the show notes to register for free. Can't wait to see you guys there. Let me give some more evidence to this from my own personal experience. I will reveal vulnerably my dating woes and fails, but I think they can be relatable to most people. So I will explain my dating process through time to map out how this is a real truth, okay? When I was younger, I had certain physical preferences that were essentially, if a girl was super hot, whatever that means, to me it was very beautiful, slim, thick figure. Sorry to sound like a pig, but I'm just being truthful. And like popular, because I wanted to advance my status in college. That was the person I was. I forgive that person, but I've come a long way. And that was my egoistic type. That my type had to fit that criteria. And what was interesting about this type is that there was also an unconscious ring to it. That regardless of how a woman looked, I would only date and fall in love with a woman with the same pattern, and that pattern was blowing incredibly hot and cold, which meant that they would be very, very forward in their interest initially, being like, you're so hot, I like you so much. So I had to get like a high, like, oh my God, this hot, cool person thinks I'm so amazing. How could that possibly be a thing? There's no way. And that would, of course, then progress as pulling very far away and like taking a long time to answer and being distant and cold in person, not being as likely to be intimate, both emotionally and physically. And that was a pattern I required to fall in love. If a woman was warm and always consistent, I would push her away because that wasn't what I was used to, because I grew up with a mother, I love her deeply, who displayed that pattern, or I perceived it that way. I don't know if it wasn't conscious of her. Obviously, she loved me very much, but I perceived it that way. Because I perceived it that way, that was my trauma. And that was actually my karma from past lives. And that sounds crazy, but it's a pattern I've been perpetuating for many, many lifetimes. So even though my brain was like, I need a girl to be a certain way physically, it was actually a masquerade for me attracting the same kind of woman to reveal to me my karma, my trauma. I healed that, thankfully. I healed that pattern of hot and cold through therapy, through investigating it. And I stopped attracting that. And that felt good. Whenever a woman was very hot and pulled back, I was like, yeah, I'm not worth this. I'm worth someone who is consistent and who sees me and isn't just perpetuating their trauma. And I'm actually like, I don't want to give someone my traumatized self. If someone's blowing hot and cold and I'm giving myself to that dynamic, I'm giving them my wounded self. So I refuse to give myself to someone knowing that I was perpetuating my traumatic karmic wounding, because I was giving that to them. And they're also giving that to me. That's what's also true about traumatic relationships and dynamics and situationships, is that you're giving them your wounded self. And in return, they're giving you their wounded self. And why would I want to give someone the version of myself who's deeply hurt, deeply wounded? Because I'm going to make them feel the same way. And once you realize that, you kind of stop entertaining shit like that. So, long story short, I healed that, right? But that same egoistic preference of like, I want this person, I want that person, I want this. When I follow my egoistic desires of like, I need this girl to be a certain way, these certain values, these certain things, other unconscious patterns would appear. Two things especially. I attracted a woman who would caretake me because I lost my mother and I didn't know that I needed that maternal love. So I attracted a woman who gave that to me because it was an unconscious pattern I had to heal to learn to give it to myself. And I attracted in fucked up dynamics where a woman was caretaking me and seeing me as broken and wanting to heal me. And I was giving them that gift of perpetuating their wounding, and I was giving them my wounding. And I created a wounded dynamic that was rooted in me believing that I couldn't give myself love, that someone else had to give it to me because I was so broken. And I kept attracting a woman like that. And the second one was I attracted in lovers that didn't have much depth. I'm sorry to sound hubristic, but I am a deep person. I'm a deep person. And I think a lot of us are, especially if you're watching this content. And it's scary to meet someone who matches your depth because that depth is so rare. When you meet someone with that depth, you know this is real. This is real. This could be real love. And so many of us, when we attract in someone with depth, we push them away because we're not ready for real deep intimacy. Because it was that real deep intimacy wasn't safe for us growing up as a kid. So we'll push away depth and welcome in people who are shallow but are nice, cool, loving, kind, because that level of intimacy is something we can tolerate. Because I can afford to lose this. I can afford to lose someone who isn't deep. But someone who's really deep, I can't afford to lose that person. So I'm not even going to go there because that's the potential of that hurting me is too much. So personally, I would settle for women who weren't deep because I knew that that level of intimacy, I could afford losing that. So if she's nice and kind and cool, but not deep, I can afford losing that. So it felt safe. But a woman with depth, no way. Like that would crush me. That would kill me. That would destroy me. And sorry to sound, woo-woo. I'm actually going to stop apologizing for that. This is real truth. If you don't want to believe it, that's okay too. I'm trying to explain things as well in a very literal way as well, so I can accommodate anyone who's listening. I had a past life where I've been a teacher almost all my lives, and this one I just wanted to chill with my divine lover, my counterpart, who I've been in union with in almost every incarnation, and her and I were just living in abundance on a farm with a family. And it was a real first time I just allowed myself to be, to not need to teach or prove myself. I was just in a state of love with my lady, my children. And the negative polarity, the demonic beings, what you may call them, the negative faction we're at war with in this reality, the I've been fighting for millennia and lifetimes. And I've been a high enemy for them because I live in love and they live in fear. They took my woman away from me and killed her, and that's left a deep hole in my heart from that lifetime. I even feel emotional talking about it. So because of that deep betrayal of these enemies killing my woman, when it was the first incarnation where there was deep love, like only just focus between her and I, my soul now is so hurt from that experience that I fear being with someone with real depth because I don't want to be that destroyed again. And I've had to heal that. And I'm in the process of healing it. So anyways, back to the original point. I attracted in that dynamic, along with the one of the caretaking, when I was operating and dating off of what I need, I want this person, I need this person, I will do whatever I can to get them. And I had no idea of this higher wisdom that knew more than me, that would give me people, and it would be a much different experience than me chasing things because I wanted them, my little I wanted them. Whenever I followed the desires of the little I want this, I need this, I was manifesting, perpetuating my karmic states of wounding, and it was just this never-ending cycle of pain to then get to a point where we surrender to the highest good. Karma essentially just exists to keep burning us for us to realize, I don't want to follow this wheel. I surrender to the part of myself that knows more than me. I'm done with this cycle of pain and wounding. And the minute I sacrifice that egoistic need and desire and surrender to the highest self bringing me what was meant for me, and knowing what that feels like. And just to digress a bit, you know what it feels like when your higher self is giving you something. It feels surrendered. It feels loving. It feels peaceful. It feels safe. And you know when your ego is attracting something to perpetuate your karma. It feels dangerous. It feels uncertain. It feels confusing. It feels painful. And when we follow that egoistic karmic sensation, we're just digging ourselves a further trap to get out of. But when we trust the surrendered, loving experience of a gift from a higher self, that's when we start entering the highest timeline. And the minute I stop following that egoistic need to burn karma, I stopped attracting in toxic situations. Like, it's crazy. The minute I back to that image I explained earlier, the minute I put my hands up, I'm like, I surrender. The minute I enter that state of coniunctio romantically, I could catch these things. I'd have a woman, reach out, dream girls on Instagram, models, all you name it, whatever the ego wants, and I could catch it. I could see immediately, this is my karma. This is a pattern of mine. This woman isn't deep. This woman wants to caretake. This woman is going to blow hot and cold. I could catch those things in a nanosecond and say no. And that's been it's been a massive game changer to just know that, like, I can't follow the desires of my little I, of the egoistic needs I have based on wounding and unworthiness. I can't do that. And the minute I stopped doing that and surrendered my sense of control and ignored my typical desires, I found a sense of peace and love that I've never known before. This complete serenity of trust that I'm being held and guided by my highest self. And that highest self will bring me the right person for me when the time is right. And I don't know who that person is. I won't know. And that's okay. I'm not going to chase it and try to prove to my ego that this person is right, this person is wrong. I trust and I surrender. The biggest impediment to reaching coniunctio in life romantically is that our ego wants to stay alive at all costs. It wants dominion over your consciousness because that's just the way it's operated, right? We're in a game where it's really hard to reach that state of enlightenment. And that's why we reincarnate over and over again, because it's hard to reach that state. And it takes real work and real dedication to the highest good to make that a reality. So the ego is going to do whatever it can to hold on to control over the brain. That's its job. This is not an easy game to evolve out of. This is a real hard game to conquer. That's why, again, many of us reincarnate thousands of times because we can't conquer this game. But there is a version of ourselves. Each of us has a version of ourselves that conquer this game. We can access that version of ourselves to escape the karmic wheel of destruction and matrix, realities to enter divinity. So the biggest impediment to accessing that coniunctio, that the higher self, is the ego's sense of believing that I control reality. I control my reality. I know what's best for me. I think that if this person is hot and right, they're the one for me. I'm going to chase them. If I can't get them, I'm going to be miserable. That part of yourself that thinks it knows better than divinity or your higher self or reality, that part of you will keep jabbing at you, keep yapping at you till you die. So the only solution is to realize that it doesn't know shit. That there is no such thing as having control. There is no, it's a complete illusion. The only truth is surrender. Life just is. Everything's already happening. God's already created everything. To believe that you can create your own reality and control things is an illusion. And the minute we accept that truth and surrender to the highest good is when we reach that state. But that requires surrender. That requires bearing the cross of your ego and accepting that this is part of me, but this thing can't drive the car anymore. Now, in terms of how we can leverage this reality to attract in our divine counterpart, or the highly enlightened, loving being that could be our divine counterpart, let me give some evidence for how this happens within people who aren't even spiritual, or don't understand this concept. Now, listen to this. Most women who fall into deep, healthy love all say, this person wasn't my usual type. I would have never dated this person, right? Now, why is it a constant reality? Because this woman realized that her ego's desires, her perception of who I need and who I want, never actually got her what she needed and what she wanted. So she sacrificed that little yapping voice who only wants to perpetuate wounding and karma, and entered a state of trust and surrender to her highest self, knowing that I trust your knowing, your intelligence, to bring me someone who is my divine counterpart, versus my little dumb ego who thinks they know better than this magical being, to give me who's actually my lover. All women who find real love have to go through this process of surrendering their ego's desire of who they want to this divine counterpart. Because again, all these women say, this person was not my usual type. This is as clear as it gets. We have to realize that our egos do not know what's best for us. They know what's best to keep perpetuating our karma and our pain. Again, our ego knows best in regards to choosing things that perpetuate our wounding and perpetuate our karma, so the ego can stay alive and keep creating our reality. This is the game we're in. This is 3D reality. We escape 3D reality. We escape the ego's perpetual burning and karma once we realize that this little vehicle, my brain, does not know what's best for me, ever. My higher self does. This surrendering of control to the higher self is when we break karma and we enter Coniunctio, and we enter the possibility of entering the higher self's timeline. When we're in that state of full surrender and trust in the higher self then we enter the higher self's timeline. Because we're no longer we burn through our karma. We burn through our karma when we stop identifying with the ego's desires. Then it's done. When we surrender to the possibility of the unknown adventure and beauty of the higher self, there's no karma to burn, because there's no ego anymore. There's just the higher self, which is the real version of ourselves. There's many different understandings of the symbolism of Christ. I've discussed many, but the one that resonates right now is that you have to bear your cross. And what that means is you have to look at and bear the weight of your ego and see how much destruction it's caused you. Think about this. How many times do you have to go through desiring something, not getting it, or getting it, having it broken, feeling horrible and miserable and in grief and in deep pain and insecurity? Each of us has experienced this 1,000 times, yet we keep torturing ourselves by following this pattern. And we have to look at that truth and be like, man, I followed this egoistic desire constantly and it destroyed me. I can't do this anymore. You have to feel that devastation of all that pain that's caused you. You have to feel it, because only when you feel how much pain it's caused you can you transcend it. Look at all that pain that ego's cost you and devastation. Feel it, face it, see it. Now when you feel all that burning, it's like, man, I can't do this anymore. I cannot fucking do this anymore. When I was a drug addict, it took me to see the pain that drugs caused me, to get rid of them. Being like, yeah, it was fun. I felt a lot of pleasure. I had a lot of heightened experiences, but this ruined my life. I was a horrible person. I did bad things. I was in so much pain. I can't do this anymore. So we have to basically visualize and see the pain of our ego and our karma to realize, I don't want to do this anymore. Forgive that you did that. Forgive that you were in a state of incarnation in this soul experience where you followed your karma constantly. It's okay. Every single one of us did it. That's why we're here. Forgive it. It's okay. It's all good. It all got you here right now. You're here right now. All that was beautiful lessons in making you realize that I can't follow the ego. It's not, I can't do it anymore. Now, you can't delete the ego. It's here. Your sense of separation as a separate self from divinity or reality or presence. It's always going to be here. And I think there's a purpose to it. And I believe that purpose is to use the ego to constantly gift itself back to the self. So, for example, whenever I start thinking about separate thoughts rooted in separation or desire, like I need this girl doesn't want me, this podcast did bad. When I catch those loops, I feel my heart and I put my hands up and I say, I surrender. That's the ego using itself to surrender back to the higher self, right? So there's two versions of the ego. Using the ego to perpetuate karma, saying, I want this thing to happen, it didn't happen, I'm gonna make it happen, it didn't happen, but this other thing can happen, I'm gonna make it happen. Or we can use it saying, I want this thing to happen. Wait, who is this I? Okay, it's not even real, it's this little I that constantly is wrong. I surrender back to the higher self. That's the version of the ego that's actually what is needed. It's like a little friend we can use to remind ourselves, oh, okay, I'm not following that path. I surrender back to my higher self. How does one do this? How does one surrender to the higher self? When I was 20 and just waking up, 21, I asked my guru, what's God? And I was expecting some esoteric answer of like some of this guy in the sky, this alien, whatever. All he said was, God is the space between thoughts. God is the space between thoughts. What the hell is this guy talking about? It took me five years to understand it, that the space between thought is Coniunctio, there's no separation. We're present, we're here, we're with the higher self, we're trusting that we're guided. That's God, where there's no separation. The space between thoughts, pure presence, is God because there's no separation. And the more time we spend in that state, the closer we are to God / the higher self. When you're in that state of pure presence and no thoughts, you're in a state of surrender. There's no desires, there's no wants, there's no needs. Desire is simply a thought created by our ego. So if we exist beyond thought, there's no desire. So what I do is whenever there's any thought, I surrender. I devote myself to not thinking. Because any thought is rooted in the little I that wants control. So I surrender constantly, because I realize that, again, whatever the ego wants and desires through thinking, through desiring, it just wants peace and presence. But again, we're already swimming in peace and presence. It's always here. So why not be in that state constantly? So I try and stay in peace and presence as much as possible because it's always here. And I know that it's not out there. So when the voice inside my head tells me that peace is out there, I don't listen. When the voice in my head believes that love and peace is found in a lover or money or an outcome, I don't answer that call because I know it's not true, because peace and love is right here, right now, always. This is when we burn through karma. When karma, demonic entities, hell, whatever you want to call it, only exists when we identify with our thinking, because it can put thoughts in our mind that we believe. So if I believe a thought that says, I need a hot girl to prove I'm worthy, and I follow that thought, if you break it down to its rudimentary parts, it's just a thought. So if we exist beyond thought, there's no traps. That's why I don't like the modern self-help recommendations to just replace negative thinking with positive thinking, because you're still requiring thinking as a way to salvage yourself out of pain. And if you need thought to feel peaceful, you're setting yourself up for disaster, because you're going to be in a constant swarm of traps constantly. If you're always finding happiness through replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts, you're fighting yourself. You're literally fighting yourself and your mind with mind. How can you beat mind with mind? What is that? You only can beat mind by not identifying with it. That's it. So when you exist beyond thought, there's no karma anymore. It's burnt. The more time you exist in the space between thought, the more you destroy karma. And to summarize everything I'm saying, when we enter that state of pure loving awareness, where we don't identify with any thoughts, it's all love, it's all peace, it's all presence, we are now in the timeline of the higher self. And when we're in the timeline of the higher self, we then attract in what the higher self desires for us, because we're ready for it. The higher self can't give us the highest things for ourselves if we're still stuck in karma. If we're still following that voice of needs and desires, when we're stuck in karma and egoistic desires, we're manifesting things constantly to perpetuate that karma. But once we exit that through living beyond thought, we now enter the highest possible good. You can't entertain the highest beings of love and positivity when you're stuck in desire and believing your ego knows better than your higher self. Once you enter the state of surrender and non-thinking, you don't enter a possibility of welcoming in your highest good and your divine counterpart, because you are the divine. Once you surrender to thought, once you stop perpetuating your karma, you become God. You're not literally God, but you become the consciousness of pure loving awareness. Once you enter that state, you enter Coniunctio, where the divine can truly experience itself through you because there's no karma. God can't experience itself through you if you're stuck in karma, because you're experiencing life through your egoistic desires and needs. And when you only can reach God's incarnation, God's consciousness, when you realize that there's no you, there's just loving awareness. And when you're in that state, the divine can really experience itself through you because there is no you. It's all loving awareness. There's no separation. How can God experience life through separation? He can't. They can't. Whatever the divine mother father can't. Okay. So to summarize, we will keep perpetuating our toxic patterns and karma until we stop letting that part of ourselves drive the car, which means removing any desires that are rooted in right now is not enough, which means we have to try our best to exist beyond thought. It's a hard thing. I haven't gotten there, but the devotion to getting there will open the door. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's pretty complicated, but this is the code of all codes: to exist in loving awareness, to surrender to the higher self, because once you get there, life gets really juicy. Once you realize that peace and love is always here, we actually experience it. If you think that peace and love is out there somewhere through someone else, through something, we can never experience it. So feel that right now. Feel that peace, feel that love. It's always here. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.